hit record real quick. All right. Got a few more people coming on late. That usually happens. If you're watching on Facebook and you want to actually get it over here on the Zoom, the way to do that is follow the joint register for book club link that I posted. It's my previous post, and that will bring you to the registration. And what's great about that is I'll also be sending out the replay of this. So if you miss it, part of it live, or you can't stay for the whole thing or whatever, I'll be sending out the replay to everyone too. Sirens, I mean, hopefully a lawnmower will start going off behind me. Almost finished. Yes, listening to on Audible. Awesome. Are we liking it so far? What's the consensus? I want to hear a little feedback. It really resonated with me because it's stuff that I talk about all the time. But I feel like I kind of talk about it in more of a woo-woo kind of way, like a softer, more like emotional type of way. And this was more of like a strategic, kind of down to business, action oriented type of way. And it's all the same message, but sometimes we need the same message to be delivered in a lot of different ways so that we can relate to it or find little pieces in there. Or maybe even it's just so that we can start to believe it. Because we're like, well, if this person's doing it and this person's doing it and this person's doing it, and they come from all different walks of life and they're all saying the same thing, then maybe there's some truth to the practice. I often in my coaching, I quote a lot of people from all different backgrounds. So I can already hear fire alarms going off. I don't think that's ours. Maybe they're here early. So I will quote scientists or great artists or thinkers, philosophers, musicians, anybody who is achieving incredible things, extraordinary things, living extraordinary lives. I love to share, even just entertainers, people on television, whatever. I love to share their insight because when you begin paying attention to what everybody's saying, you notice a thread that ties it all together. Everyone's kind of saying the same thing, but it's like we have to hear it 100 times before we actually believe it, right? Jennifer says, I absolutely love this book. I want to take some of his classes. I plan to. Yeah, he seems fantastic. I mean, he coaches like 150,000 people every year, which is really incredible. Karen says, so much useful data and strategic ideas. Yes, yes. Let me check on the Facebook comments here. Okay, so let's just dig into it. Let's dig in. All right, so the like big idea of this book, right, is that human potential is this like vast untapped resource. And when we are able to unlock it, we can like next level in life. Our potential is much greater than we ever dreamed for ourselves. And as you guys know, if you're a lot of people from my coaching program are on this call, this is what I love to talk about. This is my jam because even if I look back in my business a decade ago, I was doing great things at the time. Like I had reached what I thought was the peak or the pinnacle of our industry. But I felt this calling into doing more, to doing other work and to impacting more people, not just through my photography. I used to own a photography studio, but I could feel this internal tug, like I'm supposed to be impacting people through more than just what I do with my camera. And I didn't know what the heck that was. And it was terrifying because I had built $1 million business and it was like our family's whole livelihood. And how do you walk away from something like that because of a feeling inside? You have a feeling that something else, that you're supposed to be doing something else, creating something else and having more impact. And I think anybody, when they're at a place in their life where they're ready to stretch, grow, or next level, has this very universal experience of like fear and a little bit of self-sabotage. So that fear makes our ego kind of step in and want to protect ourselves. And so the ego comes in with all the limits, all the reasons why you can't do it, why you shouldn't do it, why you're not enough, why everyone's going to laugh at you, whatever. And that's all our like persona that's built to protect us, right? So the author, Jim, says that everyone can reach that fullest potential, that like little voice inside that's calling you into something higher and better. Everyone can reach that through grit, determination, and purposeful intelligence. And then he kind of goes into ways throughout the book, right, to change your energy, to change your level of motivation, to change the way that you learn, right? So his big thing, he had a traumatic brain injury, right? And so he had trouble learning in school, and his teachers even called him like the boy with the broken brain. So he had a real hard time like remembering stuff, focusing. And I related to that so much because there was a time for me in early motherhood when I was like just building my business where I became so overwhelmed with the amount of everything that I had to keep up with, that I started going to a doctor to be like, what is wrong with me? Why can't I focus? Why can't I remember anything? And this is when I'm in my like early 30s. And that's when I got a diagnosis of adult ADHD. And I was like, okay, well, that makes sense. That's why I can't remember anything. That's why I can't focus. It's like just the way my brain is. And I think a lot of us do, oh, that's just the way that I am. Like, this is just the way that I am. That's the way my brain is. Not thinking that I was capable of changing my brain. And it was through this work over the past decade that I recognized that you are capable of changing your brain. And so I just love this book because he had a very much more severe traumatic head injury that was causing a real physical change within his brain. And he figured out a way to change it. And does anybody know what that's called? Our brain's ability to change itself with our work, with our help. That's neuroplasticity. Do any of you follow Dr. Amen? I think it's Amen. He has a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life that I also highly recommend. Write it down. Write it down. That's a good one. So he talks about a lot of different factors, ways that you can change your brain. And he does brain scans on people with whatever, traumatic brain injuries or ADHD or drug addiction or whatever, all the different things that could possibly damage the brain. He does brain scans, and then he puts people on different protocols based on the way that their scan came out. So that's a really kind of fascinating one too. And Jim goes into it though, like the same thing that he talks about in his book and his experience is the same thing that this brain doctor is talking about, right? So have any of you ever struggled with like focus, overwhelm, anxiety, depression? Though all of those things are related to the health of our brain, what's going on in our brain, the way that our brain is firing, the chemicals in our brain. And there are ways to rewire that through practice, habit. And that's the whole heart of this book, right? So one of my favorite quotes from the book is, what I have come to find over my years of working with people is that most everyone limits and shrinks their dreams to fit their current reality. Ooh, I love that. I love it. That most people limit and shrink their dreams to fit their current reality. So I want you to take a minute. And by the way, after this call, I'm going to be sending everybody a little PDF like journal sheet. So a lot of the questions that I'm going to be asking you today during book club are things you can reflect on after as well. Okay, so you'll be able to just print that out and journal it for yourself if you want to. So just think about, what are the ways that I am limiting my dreams to fit my current reality? And do you know when the height of this happens for all people? The height of it is between 35 and 45 years old. It's usually right around the 40 mark, which I turned 40 this year. Because up until that point, we are learning and growing, and there's so many goals. We're building families, we're buying houses, it's like the life is like one achievement after another up until that point of around our 30s. And then we've established ourselves and we're comfortable, right? And it's like, and if there's a part of us that wants to stretch, grow, learn something new, that's when our fear steps in, because it's like, no, you're comfortable here. This is your life you built, and we're good. We're good. It's a natural part to grow and stretch in those younger years. It feels very natural, and like that's just what we do. And then suddenly, when you're settled, it becomes very difficult to expand and change and grow and learn more. But we are not meant to stay still. That's not our person. We are meant, human beings, like we are meant to continuously expand into our curiosities, our new ideas, the things that we create, our hobbies. And when we don't listen to that side of ourselves that wants to continually grow, we begin to feel stuck, stagnant, depressed, maybe low level kind of frustration, or like there's something more, but I don't know what it is. And this is when I hear from a lot of women, especially, like kind of a little bit of guilt around like, oh my gosh, I have so much in my life. Like I have so many blessings. I love my life. So why is there a part of me that wants more? It is just the part of you. There's nothing wrong with that part of you. It's just the part of you that wants to continue to grow and expand, which is your natural state of being, is the state of expansion. Okay, so after Jim heals his brain, he became a brain coach. That's what he calls himself, a brain coach, right? And so he did that for 25 years, for 150,000 people every year. And he's worked with everyone from kids with special needs to like pro athletes to really high performance CEOs. So a whole gamut of different brains he has worked with, but this process works for everybody. It works for everybody. There's always a next level of potential that our souls want to grow into, that our being wants to grow into and be expressed, right? So his whole theory, and mine too, so I'm going with him on this, but people are conditioned to believe that they have limited focus, strength, and intelligence, which curtails their capacity to create, contribute, and succeed. So we all hit our upper limit. Do you guys remember, anybody in my coaching community, what's the book I always talk about, Upper Limits, where we hit our upper limits? Does anyone remember? If you haven't read it yet, it's called The Big Leap. The Big Leap, yay, Jamie. Did you end up reading it? The Big Leap. Here, yep. It's The Big Leap. So this is a good one. In fact, I should probably reread it because I quote it all the time. That was like a turning point in my life when I read that book, and I would say it was over a decade ago, where once I read it, I was like, oh God, I'm doing that to myself big time, upper limits. And you can have upper limits. It's like your threshold for feeling good, your threshold for joy, success, abundance. So you can hit upper limits with money. You can hit upper limits with relationships. All done. The fire thing is? Oh, good. Yeah, good. The fire alarm's passed. Great. It wasn't that loud out here, but I'm going to stay outside. No, I'm going to stay outside because it's nice. So you can hit your upper limits in all different areas of your life. And this is the place where you start to self-sabotage yourself. And so what Jim is saying is, because of your conditioned beliefs, so who conditions us? Like, what do you think conditions us to believe we have a certain level of success in any given area of our lives? That we're allowed to feel a certain amount of joy, success, abundance, love. What teaches us that capacity? And when does it happen? Anyone have any thoughts on that? Family, school, yep. It's in childhood. It's all in childhood. Family, childhood, society, life, and it's always happening. Yeah. And you're right, Jennifer. I would say like the majority of it is in childhood, but it does continue to happen all the time. So that was a really good point, Jen. It does happen all the time, because let's say that you're in a relationship as an adult and you get your heart broken. And so you start to learn like, oh, I'm only allowed to be this happy, or nobody loves me, or I'm going to be abandoned, or when I finally have something good, it's going to fall apart, right? These are all different upper limits. We've all got tons of them. So there are things in adulthood too, especially when you're hurt, when you get hurt. that form those upper limits. And the purpose of the upper limits, the only purpose really in our psyche, is like to protect us from getting hurt again, to keep us safe, get our needs met, make sure. And that's more what happens in childhood. We want to stay safe and get our needs met instinctually. So we create these like, oh, I'm safe if I'm quiet, or I'm safe if I please everybody. I'm safe if I say yes, even if I don't want to do something, but I'm going to make everybody happy. So like those all become like embedded into us, and they limit our capacity to stretch ourselves, to create, to grow, whatever. Because when we're ready to stretch, you've heard the term, I'm sure, success is outside your comfort zone. When you're ready to stretch into that next level, there's that part of you that's like, no, this isn't safe. It's just, and they're like, nope, go back to being the old Heidi, because that's the safe person to be. That's the person everybody likes. That's the person that's has made her way in the world. That's the person who's accepted. And every single one of us does that. And so we just play that role of the person we became to get our needs met, right? And that's okay, but it's just not fully who we are, and it's not our full potential of who we can be. So to become that full potential, we're going to have to get a little uncomfortable. All right. So another quote in the book that I really liked is, if you are struggling to reach a goal in any area, you must first ask, where is the limit? Most likely you're experiencing a limit in your mindset, motivation, or methods, which means that it's not a personal shortcoming or a failure pointing to any perceived lack of ability. So what he's saying here is it's not something wrong with you. It's not a shortcoming. If you're struggling to reach a goal in any area, maybe it's weight loss, maybe it's starting a blog, maybe it's something to do with parenting, maybe it's something to do in a relationship, whatever the goal is, if you're struggling to achieve it, start to ask yourself, where is my limit? This is the big one that comes up with money. So if you want to make a certain amount of money in your business, or you want to make a certain amount of money in your career, where is the limit? And the limit can always be traced back to your conditioning, to something, some idea within your family, what you were taught at school, some pain that you experienced, some heartbreak, whatever. Okay, so I want you to take a minute right now, if you have a piece of paper next to you, take a minute and just write down a few goals that you want to achieve, like in the coming year. So we'll give it a 1 year time frame. Write down just a couple of goals. Make them big, make them exciting, make them things you're like this would be a stretch to achieve this. I'll tell you mine. I guess it's not a stretch, but it is a goal that I've been procrastinating on. And that is to finish writing my book by the end of this year. So I have a big move coming up, so it's not going to happen then, but I want it to be done by the end of this year, which means I'm going to have to do a lot of writing this fall. So pick a goal, any goal that you want to accomplish in the next year. And I just want you to write it down, make it concrete. And then let's think about the rest of the call here today. Let's think about everything we're talking about in the context of you achieving that goal. Okay. All right. So now that you've listed what that goal is, and I'm going to send you this as a PDF afterwards too. So if you don't have time to write it all, you can continue to journal this later. What are some negative ideas or beliefs that are holding you back from starting now? What are some negative ideas or beliefs that are holding you back from starting now? So let's just use me as an example with writing the book. I just immediately gave a limit, right? I go, my goal is to finish my book by the end of the year, but I'm about to move, so I really don't have a lot of time, right? Okay, so I immediately said my goal and then said my limit right afterwards, like but you know. In fact, this was funny on a coaching call, because we were talking about paint night and watercolors, and somebody was saying like, oh, I want to do more watercolors, but I really don't like the medium. I get frustrated with it or whatever. So it's like it was like, I want to do this, but I'll never do it. Like it's not for me or whatever. And so you can see how we like protect ourselves with our limit as soon as we put the goal out there into the universe. So what are some of those negative ideas or beliefs that hold you back from starting today, starting right now? Because if I'm being completely honest with myself, I'm not moving for another 6 weeks. And most of my work until then is like packing my house and my family. So why couldn't I work on my book for 15 minutes today? There's no reason I can't take out my laptop and work for 15 minutes on it. Okay, I could, right? So really question those. Okay, so another thing that you can think about doing once you write down what are some of those limits that keep you from starting today, right now, are to rephrase them. So let's say, like, and he talks about this in the book, is rephrasing. So maybe he said, like, okay, I have a weak memory. How can we rephrase that? Maybe I can improve my memory. I can work to improve my memory, right? Or I have no time. We can rephrase that to say, I will make time for my priorities. So for me, for example, if finishing the book is a priority right now, today, then I will make time right now, today, even if it's a small amount of time that I can squeeze in. All right, so then the author goes into the 4 modern supervillains. You guys remember what these were? They're all kind of related to each other. He says modern supervillains, because they're all related to the digital world. So he says, I'm gonna wait for this truck to go by maybe. He says digital deluge. Oh, it's also trash day. So let's just add trash day to everything else. All the other noise. I'm wearing my AirPods, so hopefully you guys don't hear too much of it. All right, so the 4 supervillains are digital deluge, which is basically information overload overwhelming us. I experience that because I do it to myself because I buy all the courses and all the books and then there's also, logging on social media and all that. Digital distraction, which derails us from our creative projects. So that would be like keeping my phone, like I started turning my notifications off when I'm doing anything else. So like if I'm downstairs working out, I turn off the notifications. If I'm sitting down to write, I turn off the notifications. Digital dimension, I think it's dementia, and it spell checked it for me, but digital dementia, overuse of technology, which leads to a decline in our cognitive skills. I'm gonna wait for the truck. So digital dementia is real. And I feel it even after like a day of being on devices, and you can see it in children. If children, use their iPads or whatever, it's like as soon as they come off, they're still in this like fog. So because our devices are always thinking for us, it has taken away a lot of creative thinking, problem solving abilities. And when we're not doing that, when we're not like flexing that muscle in our brain, it declines over time. So doing things that flex that muscle of creating, of thinking critically, like book club, for example, that all helps to improve our cognitive abilities. And when we don't practice those and we're on technology too much, we decline those abilities. And then finally, digital deduction, which is kind of the same thing, but we let technology do like all of our critical thinking and reasoning. So that crushes creativity and it crushes our ability to think for ourselves. And that's just the state of the modern world, right? That's just like the world we live in. So we have to actively combat that. We know it's happening. We can't get away from it. Here we are, we're all on Zoom. We're using our technology. Technology is an amazing tool, but knowing what it does to our brain, it's so important to schedule in all the habits and all the things that are going to combat that decline and bring us back into the other direction, right? Okay, so here are some questions related to this. And if you have, I'd love you to share some of your answers in the chat on Zoom here or in the comment section on Facebook. Let me actually pull that up because I haven't checked it in a while. Okay. So here are some questions to consider. What role does technology play in my life? Do you use it as a tool or is it like a subconscious habit? In fact, I'd actually just like to poll you guys and see if you use it as only as a tool, give me a 1. If you use it only as an unconscious habit, give me a 2. And if you do both, give me a 3. So do you use it as a tool, an unconscious habit, or both? 3s, 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 3s. Good. I think I'm relatively balanced at that. Sometimes I get sucked in more than others. So yeah, it is. I think it's just so important to remember. It is, our brains do get addicted to technology because of the release of dopamine. So if you can consider your phone an addictive substance, it's like, can I use this as a tool and not allow my brain to slip into that dopamine cycle of addiction? Do your social media accounts cause you stress, or do you generally feel better, happy, or more fulfilled after checking them? I want to know this one too. And this answer can't be both, because it's either, so more often than not, after you check social media, do you feel more stressed, 1, or do you generally feel better, happy, or more fulfilled, 2? My answer is 1. I generally feel more stressed after being on social media. I think I just get overwhelmed. I have a feeling of overwhelm often after being on there. So it's just something to consider. Stress, yeah, a little mix there. Karen, if you're feeling better after checking, then you're using it in the right way. So I'm going to give you applause for that, because that you have learned, and we all need to do this, but it's just, how can I minimize the stress that I'm feeling? What are the things that are making me feel stressful? How do I minimize those? And how do I maximize the things that make me feel good? And I know from your participation in our coaching community and that being such a positive space, like that's a really positive use of technology, right? It's like a place we can check in, feel inspired, feel good. That's how we should be using it. And if we're like, I know by my answer, if I feel more stressed more often than not with technology or social media, I can be sure that I'm spending more time outside of those inspirational groups and those places that raise my energy. I'm spending too much time outside of those positive places on technology. Does that make sense? Yep. Jamie, Instagram and Facebook are different. Instagram is happy for me. Yeah. See that. So that's an interesting difference. And part of that is because I think, I guess I would say it's pretty similar for me, is that on Instagram, I follow more like inspirational type stuff. Where on Facebook, I'm friends with everybody, or family, friends, whatever, like everybody you ever went to school with is in there. And so you get maybe opinions and things, too much information that stresses you out. Julie says, the longer I spend on, the worse I feel. So I try to do short stints to stay at a 2. That's really good. Yep. Awesome. Okay. So we already talked about neuroplasticity, right? So that's our brains. He talks about that quite a bit. Our brain's ability to change, to form new neural pathways. So the average person, 80 to 90% of their thoughts every day are negative, and they're repetitive. They're the same thoughts that you thought the day before. And those are the neural pathways that we are wired with. We're wired to see danger. That's a survival mechanism. So we're wired to see danger. We're wired to see what's different. We're wired to see what's wrong. And then we focus our attention there. And unfortunately, we just get more of it if that's where we're always focused. So the process of changing our brains to be capable of more is really a process of switching our thoughts from that 80 to 90% negative and reframing, or rephrasing, he calls it, into the more positive thoughts that will bring us to our goals, right? This is interesting too, because this has come up quite a bit, and you'll hear this in next week's podcast episode. He also talks about teaching people how to think versus what to think. And we were just talking about this in our coaching group. So when you learn how to think, which is a lot of what this book is about, and if you're just joining us, like at this point, we're talking about Limitless by Jim Kwik, our book club book. If you haven't finished it yet, that's okay. So he talks a lot about how to think, and that's what he gets into next in the book. Does anybody have, let's just take a break from me talking for a second. Does anybody have a big takeaway from the book that they want to share? You can either come on camera and share it with us, or you can share it in the chat. But was there like a favorite part of the book overall? We got more people coming in here. Was there a favorite part of the book overall, or a big takeaway, or maybe something you want to share with other people, like kids, your kids? I'm excited today. I'm speaking at Grace's school. Well, not speaking, I'm reading a book. But it's a book called What Do You Do with an Idea? And it's just all about creative thinking, having an idea and being willing to like share it with the world and what you could possibly do with that. I was an art teacher before I did this. And if you just joined us, people are just sharing some of their favorite takeaways from the book in the comments. I was an art teacher, so a lot of what is in this book is like how I was trained in college. The multiple intelligences that he talks about, the different learning methods, the Pomodoro technique, like all that stuff. Creative thinking was a big part of my education as an art educator. I got some of the takeaways here in the comment. Thank you guys for sharing those. So Julie says, I like the way he acknowledged the importance of rest, because so many performance books can just be about doing more. Amen to that. Yes, yes. Rest is such an important part of the creative cycle of whatever, being human. So like, we have to rest for sure. We have to recharge our batteries to work at an optimal level. There was one other book on peak performance. What was it called? I'll try to look it up. But anyways, he stressed rest too. He just talked a lot about, he studied peak performers, and gosh, I wish I could remember the name of that. I hate when that happens. But he studied peak performance. And he talks a lot about like Olympic athletes and like they have to schedule in those days of rest. Karen said, I liked hearing his morning routine, basically any of the step-by-step guides that he provided. Stacy, I love the section on sleep in the book. And reading, just started using my finger now. Yeah, that was a cool tip, using your finger. Yeah. And then Jamie, I love the idea that so many things aren't inherent, they're skills and can be improved. Yes, yes, yes. And it's like, no matter what level you're at, we can keep growing. Jen H, you want to come on?
Sure. I thought it was so cool when, so I'm listening to the audiobook, or I finished the audiobook. And one of the things that, I mean, like a lot of things stood out to me, but one of the things that really stood out was I majored in psychology. So I also practiced a lot of like how people remember things. So there was this section where he said, okay, you have to remember these 10 things in order and, repeat it back. And so I was listening to it and I was like in the shower and like, oh, okay, I remember doing this. And like, I remember how people do this and use chunking and use visuals and all these little things. So went through it and I'm sitting in the shower and then I was like, okay, repeat it back. And I got like 3 words and they weren't even in order. And I was like, wow, this is really bad. And so he continued. I was like, this is horrible. I'm supposed to know how to do this. And so then he went through, his way with the whole, the fire hydrant and everything. And if I really thought about it right now, I could still do it again. But he went through his thing and then I repeated him back in order. I was like, holy shit, I could, this was so weird. This was so easy. And I was like, this just has to be me. This just has to be me. So I finished listening to that. And then wherever we were going, I had Avery in the car. And I was like, Avery, so she's my 10-year-old, for anyone who doesn't know, listen to this and I want to see if you can do it. And I kid you not, she did it. She listened to the thing and how he did it. And she was able to repeat it back to me in order, backwards, the whole thing. And I was like, this is just amazing. So yes. that really stood out to me. about like that memorization. So that was cool.
That is so cool. And I love that you did it with your daughter. I feel like I want to do that actually with my kids now because, and I know, especially my oldest, Juliana, she's a big reader and everything, but, you know, there's still areas in school where they get like worked up or upset or whatever. And like, I think just for them, they would find it really fascinating. It's like, makes it a game almost, right? It makes remembering a game.
It definitely, it did. And I mean, I, like I said, if I really went through it right and thought about it, and I was explaining it to a few other people, like my family members. I'm like, you gotta read this book and do this. And so when I would repeat it, even like now, if I went through it, I kind of like do this. So I'm like visualizing it and seeing it. And my brother, when I was doing it with him, he was like, are you like seeing it? It's like, yeah, I guess I am. I'm like, seeing the pattern of the story and, you know, just remembering each thing. And so just putting all those pieces together, I was like, how can, you know, we apply this to other things in our life that we have to do or remember. So that was cool.
Yeah, very cool. I love that. I think we should all do that. So I will play with his little challenges and see how you do with it, right? And then bringing it to kids for sure. Even younger kids. I think that's like a fun thing for a lot of ages. That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool. Does anybody else want to share? Come on video and share any of your takeaways. You can just raise your hand anytime while I'm talking, because if not, you know me, I just keep talking. Okay, so he basically has, he talks about how to retain information better. That's what Jen was just talking about. And some of the things he talks about is the Pomodoro technique, which is working for a period of time and then taking a period of time off. He talks about the faster method, which is basically forget what you know, be active and take charge, take care of the state of your mind and body, teach others, and enter time in your calendar to devote to learning new things, and then review what you're learning by writing or talking about it. So that's like everything we're doing today, really, right? And then he talks about asking the right questions too, because what questions do is they activate the part of our brain that remembers things. So the more questions that you ask, that's why. So I was just studying for a quiz with my daughter, and she just had me like ask her the questions, and then she asked me the questions and back and forth, because it does activate that memory. Jamie says, oh, Julie said it's a live brain experiment when you practice that. Yeah, it totally is. And that's fun to see the results so fast. It's almost like a magic trick, you know? Jamie says it was cool that those 10 words were the first 10 things in the periodic table, which they went into depth on the audiobook interview. Oh, that's cool. So I think it was Jamie that was saying that the audiobook of this includes a bunch of interviews too, which is super cool. So I read the book, but the audiobook has that extra bonus. So that might be fun to listen to. A lot of times I like to get both the audio and the visual. I listen to a lot of books when I walk. So, but then I also want to take notes and write things down, you know? Very cool. So then there's basically 3 things that he talks about in his like Limitless method, this is how he coaches people. So the big 3 things are mindset. Actually, I wrote down a quote from him here that I really liked. So the 3 elements are mindset, the what, deeply held beliefs, attitudes, and assumptions we create about who we are, how the world works, and what we are capable of and deserve. That's a big one. And what is possible. Mindset. That's all those things. This is a lot of what we talk about in our coaching group, right? Then motivation, the why. So this is the purpose somebody has for taking action, the energy required for someone to behave in a particular way. And then method, the how, a specific process for accomplishing something, especially an orderly, logical, or systematic way of instruction. So basically, mindset's the foundation, 100%. The mindset is the foundation, because if we don't believe something is possible for us, everything comes out of our belief. Our beliefs shape our actions that we take. So our belief is shaping why we're passionate about something, and it's shaping our method and how effective our method is. Because think of all like great, incredible things, any achievement by anybody. If they didn't believe it was possible, they never would have set out to do it. And we all have different, I always say a belief is a story you tell yourself about the world or about yourself. And we all have different ones. All our beliefs are different in different areas, whatever. And so the way that we take action in the world, the things that we do, the things that we're passionate about, the things that break our heart open, the things that the way that we want to impact and help, the ways that we want to serve, the things that we want to create, that all comes out of our beliefs and our belief in the possibility of anything, any given thing. So one is really looking at those beliefs, what's limiting us, what do we believe is possible, and shifting our mindset to believe anything is possible. Anything is possible for you if it's on your heart. So that's one, and really believing that. And then our motivation, we have to tap into why we are passionate. Why does this matter? Because if it doesn't matter, why do we give our attention to it? Right? Time and attention, those are very limited resources. They're our most limited resources in this in this game of life. Time really is unlimited too, but okay, but we won't go there. So time and attention, what we're giving it to, make sure you have a strong why behind that, because otherwise it is just depleting your energy. It is just dragging you down. But if we can give our time and attention to the things that we're fired up about, that we're passionate about, that we feel purpose about, that we love, that bring us joy, the more time and attention that we give those things, the more energetic we are. It raises our energy, it raises our capacity, it raises our potential, because we're in alignment with those things. Do you guys notice that? Like, the things that deplete you in life in general, what are things that drag your energy down? Probably things you're not super passionate or excited about, right? What are the things that fill you up and actually raise your energy? Doing them actually gives you more energy. Yeah, Jen said the things that you don't like to do. Yep, exactly. And we talk about this all the time. Like, how do we shift our life so that we're doing more of what lights us up and gives us energy? And how do we bring that into other things that maybe we don't love doing, maybe some responsibilities or obligations or whatever? How do we light it up? First, we got to figure out what lights us up. Then we got to have to learn how to bring it into every area of our life, right? And then finally is the method. And so, like, once we have those two pieces, right? We have our mindset we have a strong mindset in place. We know our why, our purpose, what lights us up, all that stuff, our passion. Then we've got to figure out how to practice it. That's the method. The method is practicing it on a regular basis. Every day we should be doing something that lights us up and raises our energy up, even if it's for a short period of time. That's the method. And we can create that for ourselves. You don't need this book to tell you the method. You get to create the method based on your mindset and your purpose and your why. So it's like doing that beginning work to figure out what all that is for yourself, and then creating a method that is unique to you, that allows you to practice. And then you can use all his little tricks and stuff to help your ability to be a super performer in whatever it is that you want to do, to learn about more faster, to remember it, all those things are just going to help you perform better, essentially, in those three key areas: mindset, motivation, and method. Right? Okay, so in mindset, the biggest thing is your limiting beliefs. So a question you can ask yourself is, what are some of the negative beliefs that I have that keep me stuck? What are some of the negative beliefs that I have that keep me stuck? And what effect do these beliefs have on my life? What effects have these beliefs had on my life? That's okay if you have to drop out of the meeting. I'm going to send the replay out, and also there'll be a PDF with these questions on it too, so that you can journal a little bit more. All right, then he gets into the types of genius. So I love this because I always say everybody has a little genius inside of them. And I truly believe that, And even when you would say, okay, maybe somebody's not an academic genius, maybe they have some sort of a disability that affects them in school, whatever, that doesn't mean they don't have some kind of genius. Everybody has some kind of genius inside of them. He talks about 4 main types: creative, communicative, people who overcome great challenges, and then people who source and use valuable data. So he just gives a couple of different examples of those different types of genius. But there is something in everybody that is their gift, that is their genius. And learning how to tap into it for yourself, believe in it within yourself, and then also learning how to recognize it in others is really the key to experiencing a lot of joy. Because if we can focus not on people's shortcomings or faults or whatever, and we can shift our attention to what is incredible about them, it really changes our entire energy in any given dynamic. So learning to see it in yourself, learning to see it in others, this is part of the work that we do. Okay, so one way you could actually discover your genius if you don't know what it is. This is, I think I first saw this on Oprah, and if you're in my coaching group, you've probably already done this. But if you haven't done it yet, ask people that know you, friends, family, whatever, ask them what your 3 greatest strengths are. What do they think your 3 greatest strengths are? And you might be surprised what people say. I did this back many years ago when I was feeling a little bit of crisis in my career about whether I wanted to stay where I was or I wanted to grow into something new, or like totally leave where I was and grow into something new. And so at the time I was running a very successful portrait studio. So I wrote around to ask people what my 3 greatest strengths were. So I asked some friends and family. I said, I'm kind of like launching, expanding into other areas in my career. So of course I thought that I was going to get back, because I've been an artist my whole life. I thought it was going to be something about art or photography, that like one of those things that I had built my whole career on would be my greatest strength. Nobody said those, actually. So I don't think it's that I'm a terrible artist, but it was all really about making connections among ideas, or like finding the thread in things, or simplifying things. Essentially teaching was part of it, but it was like taking big ideas and making them accessible to everybody, or making them more like everyday, inspiring people, right? And so now I feel like, okay, if I look back then, I didn't know what I was going to be getting into or what I'd be doing 10 years later. So back then I was just like, that's interesting. I'm really not working in my genius a whole lot at this point. I'm probably working 95% of my day outside of this zone and 5% in it. And the things that really light me up are those things that I'm doing in that 5%. But I have really shifted my career dramatically, so that I'm working so much more in those things that light me up, and that also were the response of what are your greatest strengths. Sometimes your greatest strengths come so second nature to you that you're like, that can't be my genius. Maybe it's just like listening to people. Like you're a really great listener and you're there for others, maybe it's you're nurturing, the way that you nurture people, relationships, the plants in your garden. Maybe it is creative thinking or problem solving, right? So think about what some of your greatest strengths are. If you can kind of get those answers, what are my 3 greatest strengths, and look for like, how much of a role do I let these strengths play in my life, in my work? Am I operating out of those strengths a lot? If you're not operating out of your genius, you will feel unfulfilled. you will have that sense of something being missing, stuckness, even a little self-sabotage. Because once you bring yourself into alignment with that genius and that fire, I'm going to say, that passion, that purpose, whatever, when you bring yourself into alignment and you're working out of that a lot, you are like unstoppable. You are limitless. You're limitless when you're in that zone. And it's your gift. So it's really starting to pay attention to what that could be for you. Does anybody want to share maybe if you did this 3 greatest strengths activity before, maybe like one strength that came back that you were surprised about that people mentioned, or something that lights you up, and like doing something that lights you up that maybe is just unusual, like my example was nurturing or gardening or whatever. But was there anything that came back to you, or that you're now discovering just through this process, that you're like, maybe that's something I should be doing more of? Teaching or sharing or creating. I mean, it could be something silly like, oh my God, I'm really good at reels on Instagram. And it's like my strength is like showing up and like just being silly and being fun and dancing, you know? Karen, I've been struggling with what my genius zone is all through New Year's Revolution and Unbound. And now I just texted all my closest people and asked them my 3 biggest strengths because I haven't done that yet. Yes, that'll be a really good activity for you to do. Here's what I always say when I'm talking about this, and it's just frustrating until you feel like you've really found it. And I understand that frustration because it's like on the tip of your tongue, that's what it feels like. It's like, who am I? It's on the tip of my tongue. But it is closer. It is so close that you can't see it. It's who you are. It's easy. It comes easily. It comes naturally. It comes effortlessly. It's fun. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to be Einstein to have genius. You know what I mean? It can be just a little way that you are in the world. Yes, so close that I can't see it. That's what I feel. Yeah, Karen. Yep, I have felt that. And then you start doing that thing and you're like, this was it all along? What do you mean I didn't need to buy 200 courses to figure this out? Right? Yeah. So I love that you did that. Report back to us, Karen, what people say are your 3 greatest strengths. Okay, so he goes into, I thought this was interesting. For motivation, so if anybody's ever felt like burnt out, stuck, unmotivated, frustrated, if you felt any of those things, motivation was one of the key factors in his process. So how do we get motivation back? So he says the little formula for motivation is purpose times energy times S3, which is small, simple steps. Purpose times energy times small, simple steps. So this is when he goes into some really practical things that you can bring into your life so that you feel purpose, energy, and then you take the small, simple steps, right, to feel motivated. So purpose is your passion, right? It's what lights you up. It's why you do what you love. It's why you love what you love, you know? So it's not your passion is what you love. Your purpose is why you love what you love. So for example, I could say my passion, or one of my passions, is photography. My purpose is the reason that I love photography. So why do I love photography? I love it because it helps you become present in the moment, because it helps time disappear, because it helps you see beyond the surface of things, because it allows me to see who people truly are beyond their appearance, because I become so present in the moment, in the act, in the art of photography, that a deeper connection is formed, right? So that's my purpose. And so then I realized that my passion of photography could actually be interchanged with a lot of other different passions, but my purpose remains the same. So I'm also passionate about coaching, the act of coaching. Why do I love coaching? For the same reason I love photography. My purpose of becoming fully present and really seeing the truth of who people are beyond their appearances, right? Another example would be cooking. I have a passion for cooking. Why do I love cooking? Because I love to nurture people, and it's like a creative it's putting a creative extension of myself out into the world that puts a smile on people's faces, that brings joy, that connects people, that allows us to bond. There's always laughter, and it's a way that I connect with others. So passion, cooking. Purpose, much deeper than that. So I want you to think about that. Like, what are the things I'm passionate about that I love to do? And then what is the real purpose behind that? If you can tap into that purpose, it's actually much more powerful than just the passion. A lot of times and he talks about this a little bit, but it's like not just I just heard this, somebody else was saying this too on a podcast or something, but they were talking about like, don't make a job out of doing what you love. Everyone's like, oh, do what you love and you'll never spend another day working in your life or whatever. It's not doing a job that is your passion, that you love. It's doing a job that is your purpose. The actual job doesn't matter so much as long as the purpose behind it is there. So it's really your why more than the what you do. It's the why you do more than, Start With Why by Simon Sinek. That's another great book. It's not what you're doing. It's not what you love. It's why. It's your purpose. The purpose is much more motivating and driving and fueling, because you can do the what all day long. Something you love can easily become something you don't want to do anymore if you lose the purpose, the why. All right. Okay, so you could just list a few of your passions in life, the things that you love to do, and then really think about like, why do I love doing that so much? Why? Okay. And then here's just a question for reflection. Once you kind of figure out some of those purpose statements, like why you love to do what you do, how much of your life are you living in your purpose? In all areas, your relationships, your job, how much of that is in your hobbies, whatever, how much of that is in your purpose? And things that you don't want to do, the mundane, the responsibilities, the obligations, how could you actually bring purpose into those? How could you bring purpose into those things? Because if you can, you will have motivation and energy. Wow, it's already 12 and I'm still talking. I like this book. Okay, so the last thing I would say is the small, simple steps. And he talks about diet, he talks about exercise, he talks about killing negative thoughts, having a clean environment, positive peer groups, brain protection for accidents and things, because that can harm your brain. Dr. Ammon also talks about that all the time. Learning new things, stress management and reduction, and sleep. Those are all the things if you're in my coaching community, like we're talking about them all the time, but they have to be done on a daily basis, and they seem little and they seem frivolous, but those are the small, simple things every day, taking care of yourself, that allow everything else to come into alignment, right? So we just keep practicing. And when we fall off, we come back and we practice again, right? All right. Any questions on the book? Anything you got stuck on? Anything that you were like curious to learn more about? I'm really excited about our next book club pick. Julie, I'm going to have you on in 1 second. Our next book club pick, just so you know, I'm going to be emailing it to all of you. next week. It is also about all this brain stuff, so we're going to keep talking about it. But it is getting into that with more presence and mindfulness and daily small little ways to be mindful every day. Julie, you have your hand raised?
Hi, sorry, I'm in the endless carpool line. I just think it's so interesting the talking about the like 80 to 90% of your thoughts being negative on a daily basis. And it almost feels like the cards are sort of stacked against you when that is your biology,
Mm-hmm.
that you're having to sort of keep overcoming. And I don't know, that just, it strikes me. And I was just curious to get your thoughts on that. Like, it's almost a question. I get the danger piece, but like, why are we wired in such a way?
I know. So I think it is biological. A lot of it is like survival as we evolved over time. So this is really fascinating because this is why trauma is passed down for like 16 generations in your brain, in your genetics, in your DNA. Because what happens is if you think back, like let's just go way back and you like we're humans and it's like caveman times, right? And there's a threat. Like at that point in our evolution of consciousness, all we needed to do was survive. You need to stay alive, you need to have more humans, you need to procreate, right? This was the way that the human species continued during those times. So because when something happens that is traumatic or danger, so let's say an animal comes and it wants to eat us and we narrowly escape and then we go on to have a baby, but there was a neural pathway formed in our brain to recognize that same type of danger again. So our brains evolved over time with neural pathways already formed, with our genetics already formed to recognize danger and to run. So it's fight, flight, or freeze, right? And then we pass this on to our children because the person who didn't recognize the danger got eaten by the animal and didn't continue their line, right? So we basically just pass it down through our biology, and our brains have evolved biologically to just recognize fear, to pay attention to fear. Well, now we're in an environment where we're not going to most likely be like chased and eaten by an animal, but our brains are still patterned that way. So now we live in an environment where we see like a lot of negative news, where we're just inundated with negative. That's how sales and marketing is always about lack, fear, all these things. They trigger those parts of our brain. So we're just inundated all day long with information that is triggering our survival mechanism within our brain. If you just like lived in a very peaceful environment and you didn't have all this external stimuli, you probably wouldn't be thinking negative thoughts all day long, every day. But that's not modern life, right? So we have these brains that have evolved for survival, and now we're living in modern times where it's this deluge of information that is meant to make us feel fearful. So the cards are stacked against us, you're right. But we can train our brains differently. We can begin to train our brains differently and form those new neural pathways. And we do that through simple daily practices on a regular basis so that we can recognize when we're slipping into a fearful thought pattern or a negative thought pattern. And we can begin shifting our thinking. If I really don't think that I think if I look back, yes, before I started this work, I was probably average and thinking 80 to 90% negative thoughts. I really am mostly positive, I would say now. And I find when I slip into fear, I feel it. I find it. I can feel my energy. I can recognize the patterns of thought. We all have our own different patterns of thought. Those are your limiting beliefs. When I slip into those thought patterns, I recognize it. I talk to you guys about this sometimes too in the group where I'm like, oh, I caught myself doing in the pattern now. And I can shift into, I know now how to shift my energy and shift my thoughts into positive, loving, affirming, joyful, creative. But how did I get that way? Practice. practice. And as you practice, you are changing your brain. You sit down to meditate for 5 minutes, you're changing your brain. Even if it doesn't feel like you're changing it, you're changing it. You're finding presence, you're finding peace. And every time you do that, you begin shifting that ratio. You put a card back in the positive pile and it becomes habitual. He talks about that a lot in the book too, like making things habit. We just need to start having positive habits, since nobody ever really taught us how to do that. So we grew up in a world where we're just learning a lot of negative habits, and we're not learning how to change that or how to think differently. And so this is a process of learning how to make that shift within ourselves when we recognize the slip. Does that make sense? Yeah. So simple. So schedule it in. Schedule in the time to be positive so that you can begin forming new neural pathways, so that when fear or danger comes, but this is like every time, let's just say I'm going to open up Facebook right now and I'm going to see something that makes me feel anxious or overwhelmed or stressful, because that's never going to stop happening. Something in my external world begins to make me slip into the old way of thinking negative, anxious thoughts. I formed the new way of thinking, of shifting into something else through my regular practice. It's trash trucks again. Is that my sign? It's time to go. And here's the thing. You have to make an effort to think the positive thoughts when you have no negative external stimuli. So this is why like a morning routine is so important, or an evening routine, or just somewhere in your schedule that you're making it a point to practice the positive stuff, meditation, exercise, taking care of your body, all the things he talked about, right? I have to make that a priority in my life, because the rest of everything else is actually stimulating the other side, the other way of thinking, essentially. So when I make the time to be positive, to do all this work, then when something negative stimulates my fear or whatever, I know how to get back to center, to get back to better thoughts, better feeling, emotions. If that makes sense. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for coming to today's book club. Loved this conversation. We're gonna do it again. So if this is your first book club with us, and you're not in the coaching group, I will continue to email you. You'll get the new book pick next week. And thank you guys in all the comments. Thank you if you're watching live on Facebook with us. I'm super excited to share the next book club pick with you all. Thanks, Jen. And do this all again. So book club is every 8 weeks, and it will always be this format and live out on Facebook, and everybody is welcome to join it. So share it with your friends. Even if you just watch the playback of this and you found it inspiring, share it with the people that you love, because what we share grows, and we all need more positive energy, motivation, right? All right. Have a good day, everyone. Bye.